Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out my channel. And do you remember this snowblower? Yeah, that's the one that I did the carburetor repair on another video, which I'll put a link to, or a box in my video here that you can click on and take you to it, so you can see what I did, which was just a carb repair. But this time, the pull rope is not where it's supposed to be. So we're going to do what we have to get that fixed. So stay tuned. So basically what I'm going to do is position this on the table that's going to be convenient for me to get inside here. And to remove all this, I covered in the other video, but I'm going to take this upper plate off, then go ahead and take this lower cover off, and I should be able to access the engine for the most part. Hopefully that will make it to where I don't have to take anything up on top to get to it, which I don't think I have to, but I don't have really too much experience with the recoils on this snowblower in particular. Let's go ahead and open it up and see what it looks like. Alright, so you can see I got the snowblower up on its nose. It's the easiest way to get to this stuff in the back. I removed the cover just like I did in my other video. Not difficult at all. I went ahead and took the fuel line loose and drained all the fuel out into a gas can. I then took the cap off of the fuel tank to allow that to move a little bit more freely. I'm now going to take off all the bolts that are inside here that hold the fuel tank to this bracket, which there's just two of them. So you're going to have a wrench on one side to hold the nut and a socket on the other to turn the bolt. There's one here, then there's one down here. And then on this side, this is a rubber grommet style stud. So once those two bolts are loose, this fuel tank should move around enough that you can slide it off of that stud. That's just to free up the tank and move it out of the way, so then I can remove these two nuts and bolts that hold this same bracket to the frame or the axle of the snowblower. Then I'll remove this one giant nut that's in the middle here. Giant compared to the others, that is. And then that'll allow me to access the four bolts that holds the recoil to the blower housing. So let's jump into it. Okay, you can see I got the two bolts and nuts that hold the fuel tank off of this part of the bracket, and then just slid the tank off of the stud and just kind of pushed it up out of the way. Okay, so here's all the nuts and bolts, and there's that bracket, and you can see everything's freed up now. What we're going for is these four bolts that hold the recoil to the blower housing. Two can be reached from up top, and the other two just pull this shield down, and you can see there's one there, and the other one's out of camera angle. Just as a side note, the manufacturers of snowblowers don't make engines. What that means is now that I'm working on the engine to pull the recoil off, I've got to use metric sockets because the manufacturer of this engine did it in metrics. So just be aware you might have to have two different sets of wrenches when working on one product. Okay, so if you've never did a recoil, it's a little intimidating the first time, but it's very easy. It's just a matter of getting this wound back up, lining up the hole, running through the rope, tying a knot, and then allowing it to retract. What you do is physically take the recoil and spin it in the direction opposite of what the recoil action would be. And whenever you get to a point where you think there's enough tension, at that point then you feed through the rope wherever it needs to go. Now in this case I needed to go through this dash panel and then through the blower housing, the hole in the blower housing, and then it came through this hole, which at that point I had lined up. I went ahead and I turned this around and I lined it up with the hole. I pushed through the rope, I tied a knot into it, I made the knot really tight to make sure it wouldn't pull through and come undone, and then I allowed it to recoil. And at that point, you're done. What I'm doing now is I'm going to line up the holes. Whenever you bolt it back together, you want to make sure that you put the rope outlet on the recoil assembly pointed in the direction that it was before, so you don't have a bind when you're pulling the cord. So let me go ahead and do that, and I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, so in my instance, I needed the recoil outlet to be right here because it's the straightest shot without bind to the dash panel up here where it's going to be pulled at. Yours may be different, but this is a pretty common area for these Toro snowblowers. Alright, now I'm just going to do the reverse of everything else that I did. I'm going to put the bracket back on the blower housing through this recoil mount bolt. Then I'm going to run the bolts through the axle mount and then mount the gas tank back on its stud and then put the bolts through the bracket and the gas tank to hold it all in place. Now, whenever you're putting all these nuts and bolts on, it's a good idea to do them loosely at first, get everything positioned, and then tighten them all at once. And that's pretty much true for everything. Okay, so it's all back together. You can see that I've got the choke hooked back up like it's supposed to be, because that has to be disconnected whenever this panel goes on and off. And I've got the control panel back on. Of course, the recoil is tight, back the way it used to be there. So everything's fixed. I do want to make note that whenever you're running the rope through the dashboard, you have to go through this panel also before you tie it off. I'm always amazed at these photos and how graphic they could be, and it's almost comical. Here you have a guy that's actually putting his hands in a running snowblower, and you can see his hand getting ejected out the discharge chute along with his wrenches. That's really, really funny. Alright, that's it. So I hope that helped you. Click like or subscribe, and I'll try to get more on like this. I appreciate it as always. Thanks. Bye.